Teach us, O Lord, the way of your statutes, and we shall keep them to the end. Give us understanding, and we shall keep your law. Indeed, we shall observe it with our whole heart. Make us walk in the path of your commandments, for we delight in it.
We light the first candle to honor the good and truth to be found in all spiritual traditions. We light the second candle to honor the earth and all of life as the creation of divine God of us all.
We light the third candle to honor and support the variety of our individual paths, which together make our one spiritual community. We light the fourth candle to honor and provide an open and safe place for all who seek greater understanding and a life of deepening spirituality.
Our first reading today is from Genesis 49, 8 through 12. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp from the prey. My son, you have gone up. He bows down. He lies down as a lion, and as a lion who shall rouse him. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. Binding his donkey to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk.
And from Arcana Celestia, numbers 6333 and 6374, where Swedenborg explains Genesis 49, here talking about the inner sense and obedience. The statements made in Genesis chapter 49 by Jacob show plainly that the word has a meaning in it which is different from that seen in the letter. For in verse 1, Jacob, who by now is Israel, says that he will tell what will happen to his sons at the end of days. Yet nothing of what he tells and foretells in fact happened to them. He says, for example, that the descendants of Reuben, Simeon, and Levi will be cursed more than the rest, and that Simeon and Levi will be divided in Jacob and scattered in Israel. Yet the opposite happened to Levi. He was blessed, for the priesthood was invested in him. Nor did what is said about Judah happen to that tribe, and things are stated about it, the nature of which no one can know except from the different meaning concealed inwardly, such as the statements in verse 9 and 11 that he lay down like a lion, bound his donkey to the vine, the colt to the choice vine. Anyone may see that these statements hold something which is well known in heaven, but cannot become plain to man except from heaven. And to him he will be obedience of the peoples, means that from the Lord's divine human truths would go forth that were able to be received. This is clear from the meaning of obedience as the reception of truths which go forth from the Lord, and from the meaning of peoples as those governed by truths. In terms of what we will discuss today, this says unconsciously. This says that to obey is to be able to unconsciously recognize and accept truth, and having done so, behave accordingly.
What happened here?
This is James 1:19 through 25, from a letter written to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do.
Well, good morning, everyone. I see you
Morning,
all.
Pete.
I see you all showed up as you were instructed. So I'm sure that you weren't really obeying me, but something in you was suggesting that you join us this morning. And so you were obeying that. Good job. Well, there's a lot of times we're not aware that we're obeying because it's just sort of, we're going with the natural flow of things. And the awareness issue may turn out to be a big deal, as we'll talk about a little later. But first, I have to tell you a story about a famous Buddhist Zen master. I think his name is pronounced Benkai. And the talk, it's about him and a talk he was giving. And this guy was a real person, but I have no idea whether the story is true. Well, Master Benkai gave talks that were attended not just by Zen students, but by people from all different ranks and sects. And he never quoted any sutras. He didn't indulge in scholastic dissertation. Instead, his words were spoken directly from his heart to the hearts of the people that were in his audience. However, the fact that he attracted large audiences did anger one of the priests from the Nichiren sect, which is a Buddhist sect in Japan. And because his adherents were going to these talks, to hear all about Zen instead of going to his church, so to speak. So this Nichiren priest came to the temple and he was determined to get into a debate with Benkai. Hey, Zen teacher, he called out, wait a minute. Whoever respects you will obey what you say, but a man like myself does not respect you. Can you make me obey you? And Benkai said, well, come up beside me and I will show you. So the priest pushed his way through the crowd to the teacher, and Benkai smiled, come over to my left side. And the priest did that. No, said Benkai, we may talk better if you're on the right side. Step over here. So this proud priest stepped over to the right side, and Benkai says, you see, you are obeying me, and I think you are a very gentle person. Now sit down and listen. Well, I guess it was probably pretty obvious to us right away, but not so obvious to the priest that at least in some small way, he was indeed being obedient to Master Benkai. And we can analyze all sorts of things about what happened in the story, but the short version, according to me, is that he didn't do this because he was trying to be obedient, or as he said, he didn't respect this master particularly. He was doing it because he had some kind of need to seem to be a reasonable, socially correct, well-behaved gentleman. It was something inside him that was making him obey this, not because Benkai told him what to do. He didn't actually sense probably that Benkai was ordering him around. He just didn't know they'd gotten to the obedience part of the discussion. So think about some times when you have had the experience of following instructions when you weren't really thinking about being an obedient person. Like, well, for me, maybe being called to dinner, and even if I wasn't ready, I went anyway. So, does that ever happen to you guys? I mean, what motivation there was the strong one? Yeah. The Bible is full of places where it essentially says, do as you're told. We're told to follow the 10 Commandments. Aren't we told to make a joyful noise unto the Lord? And aren't we told in Deuteronomy to not do all sorts of things like do not eat any abominable thing? So, that's no pork chops, no ostrich steaks, no rabbit stew. Those things are all off your list. And then in the New Testament, in the reading that we had, we heard James say, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. And then having said that, having said, do as it says, in the next breath, he says, whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. So there's this perfect law that gives freedom. And so there we have it. There's the paradox that I promised that we would talk about a little bit today. You do it, you obey this law, this perfect law, this law that gives freedom, and you'll be blessed. Just do what you're told, and that's freedom, and it's good for you. How can that be? Is this just a jumble of words that don't really fit together? How can obedience and freedom be the same thing? Isn't freedom doing what we want to do, whether or not it agrees with this law or that law? Isn't it being free of having your behavior dictated to you? Well, those of you who have children may have heard the complaint, you are not the boss of me. It's a common child ailment. Parents call it rebellion. It's a cry for freedom, for emancipation. Mom, Dad, enough of this child slavery. Well, we know that there are certain maturity issues related to children that make it in the best interest of the child that they be told what to do. Don't run into the street. Stop kicking your brother. Eat your vegetables. I remember that one. You cannot wear that to school because I said so. So there are laws for adults too. And a lot of those are in our best interest. Stop. That's a red light. So you get it. We don't think of that as slavery. Most of us don't. We think it's just a practical way to organize a cooperative society so that we can all work together and not have to think too much about, well, am I going to get hit by a car going through this intersection? Things like that. Many laws aren't that good. Some of them are abridgments of freedom, depending on who you are. Like, no, you can't vote, you're a woman. Or no, you can't use that restroom, you're black. So there's good laws and bad laws, and There's some in between, and having a law to obtain fairness doesn't mean that it's followed. Well, that's something. I mean, we could get into all the social issues associated with things like Jim Crow laws and things like that. And other countries have all sorts of laws that are oppressive. But that's not the point that we're going to talk about today. The critical question is obedience to what? And freedom for what or from what? And in whose interest? This is especially true when we talk about civil laws, but what about religious laws? In our religious scriptures, we find the 10 Commandments, and we find similar commandments and rules in probably all other religions. I haven't checked them all, but you'll find a lot of them there. The ones I've seen have something very much like that. We've talked about that in our study group. And we're told to follow them or else. We're being told by Scripture or by God through Scripture that these are the rules. And there are civil penalties for those that have made it into the codes of our worldly environment, like stealing and killing, and there's penalties that are imposed for these kind of violations, anywhere from fines and abridgment of privileges, imprisonment, even execution. Most of the penalties are not to protect the lawbreaker. They're to protect everybody else. But in the case of laws like the 10 Commandments, failing to obey does come with a penalty, but it's more like the laws of nature. They don't get repealed, and you can get hurt if you defy them. So just looking at the natural rules, like there's gravity, and if you defy gravity, it can hurt you. The law of averages, that's another law that can't be repealed. If you're playing Russian roulette, definitely the law of averages can hurt you. So in a way, these are oppressive laws. They might keep us from doing what we want, but do they make us any less free? And in fact, they do. They make us less free. But we just accept that because that's just the way things are. So let's go back and look at the 10 Commandments. I'm not going to go look at each one of them at all, but I think we can agree that we are being told what to do and what not to do. If I put another God before God, what's the penalty? Say, I love money more than anything else. It's money that I worship, so that makes money my God. There's no civil penalty for loving money. I can live my whole life loving money, and assuming that I still obey all the rules and things, there's no penalty for that. So that gets us kind of to the crux of the matter. We're kind of closing in on this paradox of what James was talking about. What does disobedience mean to me? What does it do to me? And what me are we talking about? So our teachings have a lot to say about this. I mean, even the questions there are a little hard to understand. The teachings have a lot to say. I'm just going to say a little. And it starts with the definition of a human being as a spiritual person housed in a physical body. The physical person is what we know about. It's what we sense. We have memory. We have thoughts that come from there. We have hormones. We do things. We say things. We feel things. The spiritual person is hidden inside, not physically inside, but inside the person, the way their attitudes, their moral qualities are inside. I mean, I could run into a person who is very caring and honest, but there's no way I can tell that by looking at them as a person, as a physical person. Can't even tell in an autopsy whether a person was actually really caring or honest. So where do these reside? Well, I think we understand they don't have a physical existence. And even though they can be demonstrated by a person's actions in the world, it could still be an act. Our teachings say that we spend a certain amount of time in this world and then we die. That is, the physical person kind of runs out of gas, and from everything we can tell in this world, they stop living. But the spiritual person keeps on going. What happens when I die is that I still possess whatever caring and honesty I developed while alive in the world. I wake up to find my spiritual self, and I can still feel emotions, think thoughts, interact with the people around me. Not necessarily the same people I've been interacting with, but people that have gone on before. In many ways, it's like not having died at all. In many ways, it's a lot different. It just takes a lot of time to adjust. As great as that discussion can be, the key thing is that if I disobeyed spiritual rules in this life, like not doing my best to follow the 10 Commandments, the spiritual consequences are what I have to live with in the afterlife. So I'm not going to go into the nature of heaven and hell. I'm going to let you just take it at face value that heaven is better than hell. In heaven, you get to associate with people who primarily love what God is all about and other people. And in hell, you get to associate with people who love themselves and hold tight to whatever they can get. There's lots of sermons about these ideas. And I want to touch on what the meaning of this is for us in this world. Starting out in life, we only want what we want. As a newborn, I'm self-centered. I become aware gradually that there is something besides me in the universe. And that's a natural progression. But as I grow up, that can change. The inclination I retain throughout my life to still look out for myself, that's still there. That's called ego. But as I grow up, I learn things, I experience things. If everything goes well, ego is no longer the boss of me. You know, it's still in there. But now this gets to part of the paradox that doing what we want is not freedom after all, but slavery to this hidden, sneaky master called ego. So it's not, see, make sure I am where I am. So it's not freedom, that's not freedom. What is freedom? This doesn't help us understand how obeying the perfect law that James talks about is getting us freedom. It still sounds like we either obey one boss or another. So we always obey something. And so the question is that the right answer? There is no freedom? Well, Emanuel Swedenborg does shed some light on this, and I got to warn you that at first it looks like we just replaced one paradox with another. What Swedenborg says in the Arcana, in number 2870, few know what freedom is and what non-freedom is. Freedom seems to entail everything that is in keeping with any love and associated delight, and non-freedom to entail everything that is at variance with these. That which is in keeping with self-love and love of the world, and with the desires that belong to those loves, seems to man to be freedom. But that is the freedom of hell. That, however, which is in keeping with love to the Lord and love towards the neighbor, consequently with the love of what is good and true, is true freedom, being the freedom that exists in heaven. And what he says here is about behavior in the external life. That is, this freedom involves our ability to choose a path at any given time that's following one of what is called what we call the four loves. And he says them right there: self-love and love of the world, that's two of them, and love to the Lord and love towards the neighbor. And the last two are preferred to the first two. And while in our heart we are motivated by different desires at different times, these desires all at their root are driven by just one of these four, the one we love best. To outward appearances, neither direction towards God or away from God are what we would call freedom in the usual sense of the word. In both cases, our behavior, whatever we think or plan or verbally support, it's pretty much managed by where our heart is centered. We're not really in control like it seems. Swedenborg agrees with this. He says in True Christian Religion 110, it must be borne in mind that in man, the Lord alone is active and man of himself is merely passive. And it is by means of the influx of life from God that man is also active. So it's like it's a borrowed capability. Our activities and things are a gift to us, and it's not us that has the power to do things. It's because this influx from God is unceasing that it seems to man as if he were active from himself. And it is because of this appearance that man has free will. Well, we understand from this that our life is a gift from the Lord, and it's delivered undetected to us through our spiritual self. It feels like it's us. We think we act from ourselves. We think we're deciding things, but our choices are actually limited to those choices which serve the desires of our ruling love. Well, if you listen to that quote, you notice that he says that we have free will because of this, but what does that mean? So if you just look at the structure of the human being as Swedenborgians understand it, there's two parts of us that are truly ours, and most of the rest of it is an appearance. And the two parts, and I'll use the theological terms here, are called will and discernment. But to put those into everyday terms, will is actually how we make our bodies do the things we intend. It's getting intent translated into action. And discernment is understanding what our options are and making plans. Our ruling love does a lot of the directing in how we think. In how we think about things. Because we mostly use our thinking to plan out what it is we're going to do next. And that means how to get what we want. And often that's what our ego wants. But the mind is more flexible than the heart. Our inner self, the part closest to God and the whole spiritual realm, is influencing our thinking. Everything is not completely up to what the heart wants. It's pushy. It has desires. It craves things, but it is not doing the thinking. When we are considering things like generosity or like nurturing and protecting others, like questioning what is the truth or what is useful, we are more tuned into the better influences from our inner self. But there is a trick to get our heart to go along with what our conscience says or what our notion is of how to improve ourselves. We have to overcome the temptation to just follow our old way of doing things. The idea is that we cannot change our ruling love by ourselves. We have to practice living as if we already are the better person that we've envisioned. If it's a big change, it's easy to say, but harder to do. In some circles, the process is called fake it until you make it. I don't know how many have heard that, but it's a matter of overwriting an existing habit that we are fond of and developing a new habit that our ego may not really care for. There's plenty of temptations to put things on hold and just stay in our comfort zone. The result of overcoming temptation is that you get a satisfaction, a warm fuzzy that's due to being more closely aligned with the divine. closer to heaven. We become open to the Lord changing our heart. It's not heavy lifting for the Lord to do. It's built into the nature of creation. It can't not happen. And in case that wasn't clear, when that does happen, we move away from being ego-centered and selfish, put those motivations aside, to more people-centered and generous motivations. The practice to get there is the real work. It's helpful to be able to call upon someone else as a supporter as you practice spiritual growth. There's people we can lean on to help us with that, listen to us. It's also very helpful to connect with the ultimate source of wisdom and love through prayer or introspection or listening to your inner self while reading the Word or other sources of inspiration. I don't know about you, but I've had many conversations with myself where sometimes I wonder who's talking which side of the subject. It's helpful to have those little talks. But however you do it, regardless of what you call it, regardless of what name or image that you find helpful for what I call God, or whatever tools you have in your spiritual toolbox, it can bring support for change from the inside. So the bottom line of this message is that if we just think in terms of getting what we want, the freedom we treasure is an illusion, but the treasure is real. It's a hidden capacity to put aside a slavery to this insistent but very limited ego, which can keep us small. It's a capacity to turn to a life that is open to all kinds of possibilities of being more like the Lord leads us to be, to become proficient at loving others and smart in selecting behaviors that are useful. So it's practice, practice, practice. I want to leave you with a few things to think about. I wonder if you've ever become suddenly aware that you might have made a selfish decision. Sometimes it hits right away, but often they're easier to see after the fact. Have you ever changed a habit that was pleasurable, but that somehow you decided was not a good idea? How did you decide that? Have you had discussions with yourself where you go back and forth thinking about a situation, either in the past or what you think might come up in the future, where you've tried out ideas about different behaviors? How did that go? Well, to wrap up here, what I tried to offer today is not a biblical endorsement of behaving well or lamenting the possible unpleasant outcome of having a selfish lifestyle, but a glimpse of the mechanics of spiritual growth. It's just talk, though, to describe what the path might look like. There's real work to be done to actually follow it. It's simple to say, avoid temptation and eliminate bad habits. But to actually do what you're told, it's complicated. Amen.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my life. Be thou my wisdom and thou my true word. I riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou my inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only first in my heart. I, King of heaven, my treasure thou art. I, King of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, all bright and sun. Heart of my heart, whatever befall, still be my vision. O ruler of all.
Pete, you're on mute.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say I'm not a pastor, so I don't do pastoral prayers. Encourage him to put in the service today. So that's one of my that's a good Irish hymn. I like to think about, Lord, please with us today as we think about the others around us that are in need of support, that are struggling with life, they're struggling with sickness, struggling with the anxiety of trying to decide what to do next. The violence in our society. Let us also this time think about our blessings. So God, help us remember that we've got things to celebrate all the time, people in our lives, things that have been good for us in the last week or month or years. Amen. I'll invite anybody who wants to offer a prayer out loud. And of course, we can pray in silence as well.
I want to
I would
ask.
like-
Sorry.
I would like to offer a prayer for comfort for my daughter-in-law's family. Her father passed away a couple of days ago, and they're struggling to keep it together in his passing.
I would ask that you be with Sherry.
So if we'll say together the prayer that the Lord taught us, saying, Our Father,
Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors.
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen.
Go now in peace, go now together, be sure once again my love has no end, and you are its beginning. Go now in peace, go now together, create a space and cradle a place where we all can come together. Go now alone, not lonely. Go now alive, not just living. Go as yourself and rely on my help till yourself is yourself for the giving. Go now in peace. Go now together. Be sure once again, my love has no end, and you are its beginning.